So, it's that time of year again. Another new season of The Dragon Prince, and this time, it's Season 6. Season 5 left us with very little to look forward to be honest. Yes, it was a slight improvement on Season 4, but the finale was so lackluster and the story fell so flat that there wasn't all that much to be excited about. And yet, when I put on the first episode of Season 6, a week and a half after it had dropped, thanks Netflix marketing, I had a distinct sense of optimism. Was that optimism justified? Listen, the discourse during this post-release glow period is that The Dragon Prince is back, that Season 6 finally restored the show to its former glory. And while a lot of that excitement is valid, following a strong run of episodes that give us a great springboard into Season 7, if we're judging this season as a whole, there's still a lot of things Season 6 did badly, particularly in its first half. So let's do it that way, because none of my Dragon Prince videos have followed a consistent format so far. This time we'll separate the good from the bad and then briefly summarise where that leaves the show heading into Season 7. And of course we're talking spoilers throughout, so maybe skip this one if you're not caught up on the show yet. So, Claudia's arc starts off incredibly strongly this season. She's brought Viren back from the dead, but to do so she had to kill Mothboy, and it didn't look like a painless death. Now, I didn't like Mothboy. He was annoying and he disgusted me, but even I was surprised at how visceral this scene was, seeing his blood and dismembered body parts all over that beach. To be honest, it just seals Claudia's position as my favourite character in this story. Even if a character I wasn't fond of, like Kareem or... I want to say... Tony Donuts? Even if they killed Mothboy, they'd still probably be my favourite character just by default, so the fact that it was Claudia makes her position even stronger. Boy was an abomination. I would use a Quasar Diamond to bring him back just so I could kill him again. But the point is, this scene shows just how far Claudia is willing to go to keep Viren by her side, setting the stage for what could have been an exploration of her darker, more terrifying side.
It's like you said. You do anything for family, however dangerous, however vile.
Viren himself, now brought back from the other side, again, has his own stuff going on. Finally facing the consequences of his actions and being given the chance to be the dad to Claudia that he never was, when she now needs him the most. Corrupted by his magic, mutilated following his claws, bloody from the murder she committed for his sake, and clearly mentally unstable from the torment of loyally staying by his side. So naturally, this silly bitch immediately abandons his disabled daughter because he'd rather rot in a prison cell. This writing is absurd. Claudia screaming hysterically for Viren while he's walking away, convinced he's somehow making the morally correct decision, is ridiculous to the point of parody. Yeah, I get it, the plot demands that Viren has to be in Katolis, but could you at least try to make it feel somewhat natural? Claudia then leaves Terry, her last connection to compassion, behind, in a scene that's even more comical than Viren's, as he begs the severely injured, one-legged girl not to slowly hobble away from him while making absolutely no attempt to go after her. Oh no, please don't leave me, psychotic, animal-murdering, racist girlfriend. So dumb. So dumb. But in a way, this is all even better setup for Claudia. She finally has nothing left to lose and can go all in on being the terrifying, broken, amoral villain that she always had the potential for. Oh, she just gets over it all off camera and is back with Terry in literally the next scene. And then she starts playing with cute baby forest critters? What the hell is happening? You remember that scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan flies to Magma World to face off against Anakin because he murdered a bunch of kids? And then Anakin's like, "That was pretty messed up of me, Master, but I've decided that I now have better mental health off screen." No, you don't, because that would be stupid. Like, what a monumental waste of a setup this is. Not just this season, but previous seasons too. Like, this is the second time this has happened. Viren's death at the end of Season 3 felt like it was supposed to kick off Claudia's Lich Queen phase, but instead, they spent 2 seasons wandering around the forest accomplishing nothing. Here, they've done it again, and for what? Just so her and Terry can walk back to Katolis, incident-free, and get a new haircut? I mentioned it before, but Terry is severely limiting what the story can do with Claudia. She's never allowed to go too far, she's never allowed to let her emotions take control, and she's been pretty damn boring to watch because of it.
Only you can see your own deep truth. Only you can decide the path you're going to walk.
What's the point of even having a mentally unhinged villain if you're just going to put their therapist with them in every scene? And now they've given themselves a chance to write Terry out of the equation and then immediately walked it back. So there's basically nothing else to talk about with Claudia for this season. They killed off all the potentially interesting things they could have done with her, and instead have her walk back to Katolis so she can do a perfunctory plot advancement and release big boy Aarovos. Obviously from a story perspective, releasing Aarovos was a really cool moment, but emotionally, from Claudia, it felt pretty disengaged. Nothing she did this season felt at all emotionally resonant, aside from the opening that the writers 180'd as quickly as possible. I'm not going to go through each episode individually, but episode 2, just in general, needs signalling out as one of the weak points for this season and emblematic of a lot of the problems the Dragon Prince has had for a while. Episode 1 set out its stall. Claudia had left Terry and was at her lowest point, and Rayllum and Callum had set off on their mission to reclaim the sword that could kill Aarovos. Episode 2 immediately kills that momentum by focusing on the incredibly tedious Sunfire Elf plot, which I will get to later.
In Katolis, we have a story. The king with 1,000 eyes. He was betrayed by a trusted advisor, and he began to doubt everyone around him. One by one, everyone abandoned him. The king died friendless, his kingdom consumed by chaos.
It's called the Ugly Barnacle. Once there was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. The end.
That didn't help at all.
And also Soren and Corvus checking up on Zubeia just for her to basically say, everything's Gucci. One of the few lingering threads from Season 5 was that Zubeia was infected with a zombie virus, which may or may not still happen, that's not the point. The point is, this feels like we wasted an entire episode's A-plot just to confirm that nothing significant is happening with a character who never appears again for the rest of the season. That is not a luxury the Dragon Prince can afford. Everybody knows this show has massive pacing issues and that these 9-episode seasons are already too short to substantially and satisfyingly carry the story forward. We can't afford to be wasting an entire episode confirming a tertiary character's irrelevance to this season's plot. That's the sort of shit you do off screen, not reverse a major villain's entire mental state. And yes, I know that this episode is supposed to be setting the rigging for the SS Sovus. But I'm sorry, how am I supposed to pay attention to any of that when they're sharing a screen with these flat PS1-ass grass PNGs? It's like looking at those old Harry Potter games again, god damn! Okay, so this is another one of those things that's been bogging down the story for a while now. Characters getting sidetracked when they're on a specific mission. Hopefully now that we're on the home stretch, we're past the worst of it, but it did still creep up here in Season 6. Rayllum and Callum head out to find the Nova Blade that can kill Aarovos, but instead wind up facing down a giant ice monster to fulfill an elven prophecy and get a magic wishing tiara that can bring back Rayla's many parents. Now obviously saving Rayla's folks hasn't come out of nowhere, but there were a bunch of times during these episodes where I kept asking myself, how does any of this help stop Aarovos?
I still shine for you, my dear. The moon is more than just her light. I am mere.
They went to go reclaim the Nova Blade and then got sidetracked into questing for the Quasar Diamonds, which is the second time this has happened by the way, because last season they spent half the runtime going to Luxoria to uncover more info about the Nova Blade, and then got sidetracked into finding this random sea witch, which then led to them getting sidetracked again and fighting this random pirate for 3 episodes to save a bunch of baby frogs. I keep finding myself questioning how the heroes wind up here and how any of this helps advance their goals. If this was a casual D&D campaign where your friends just kind of making the story up as they go along, that would be fine. But I'd like a little more focus from professional writers on a scripted show where the runtime is already at a premium. Obviously, characters getting sidetracked or failing in their primary goal but unexpectedly unearthing some hidden opportunity isn't inherently bad writing at all. It's something I think most writers would aim to include in their stories at some point, but it does feel like something the Dragon Prince leans on a little bit too much and can make the overall story feel very meandering and padded out. Not tons to say on this other than it's a pretty bad season for Ezran. He feels fully relegated to a side character now. I'd genuinely say Terry feels more like an integral character to the plot this season. Ez is just doing what he seemingly always does now, which is be the boring voice of diplomacy and niceness. And this is your seasonal reminder that this show's name is in reference to Zim, who, if it wasn't for this sentence, I could easily review the entire season without mentioning once. So yeah, not really anything to say about Ezran this season. I don't think we learn anything new about him. Apart from the boy apparently has negative riz.
Affairs are, well, fair.
Fair enough.
So, the Sunfire Elf Civil War plotline finally came to an end this season, and what was the point of any of this? Kareem's plan completely backfires on him at the first real hurdle, and it was all a red herring to get the Sunseed to Sol Regem so Aarovos could manipulate him into attacking Katolis. Was that payoff really worth 3 seasons of build-up?
Sol Regem is coming! It's a trap!
So that was a fucking lie.
Like, I've done the maths here. If you take off the recap, the intro, and the end credits, each episode of The Dragon Prince is 22-23 minutes of actual content, so let's say 22 and a half. Each season of the show is 9 episodes long, and there have been 3 seasons of The Mystery of Aarovos, so in total that's a runtime of 608 minutes. When you add up every scene that is centered around the Sunfire Elf conflict, it comes to 103 minutes. That is 16.94%, so let's say 17%. 17% of the last 3 seasons has been spent on a plot that was just a bait and switch to heal Sol Regem. To put it another way, for every hour of the Mystery of Aarovos that exists, 10 minutes is spent on this plotline. Now, obviously, storytelling isn't a science, there's no rule saying what percentage of a show should be allocated where, but when screen time is a show's most precious resource in a story that, I'll repeat, already has horrific pacing issues, is spending 1/6 of the show on this plotline really the best idea, just from an efficiency standpoint? If the payoff is Kareem's rebellion fails and Sol Regem attacks Katolis, why even bother with Kareem and his rebellion at all? I know you can't always write a story off because of its outcome, sometimes it's the journey, not the destination, but the journey sucked too. It was consistently the worst part of the show, so the fact that its conclusion was a misdirection makes it especially pointless. Like, if we just needed the Sunseed to get from the elf camp to Sol Regem's cave, you could have just made Kim Dale part of some lost secret Aarovos cult or something and have her steal it. Or we know that Janai is worried about the seed not growing, so establish that a little bit more and then have Pharos be some Rasputin-esque mystic who pretends to be on her side and lures her to the cave. Or we've already established that she's having visions of Aarovos, so maybe he controls her directly, and then the humans see Sol Regem attacking Katolis being ridden by the Sunfire Elf Queen. How much drama would that stir up? Or maybe some combination of them, and maybe Pharos never really existed, but it was Claudia using a spell to appear like an elf, and when she's close to Janai, she feeds the visions of Aarovos into her mind, making her more reckless and paranoid, which would also give Claudia something to do, other than walk around a forest for 2 goddamn seasons. Point being, even without introducing Kareem, there are tons of ways that you can get that same result over the course of maybe 3 episodes, and not 3 seasons. Looking back on this storyline, I think part of the motivation was creating a new subplot simply to justify keeping Amaya on screen, which is not great. Amaya in those early seasons was Ezran and Callum's protector, but we are well past the point where she's necessary for that. So she didn't really have anything to do, and I don't think the writers were ready to let her go. So they concocted this overly long Civil War plot involving her new fiancé just to keep her around. So instead of simply saying Amaya's living with Janai now and helping the Sunfire Elf rebuild off screen, we had to watch them planning every stage of their wedding as they dragged this Civil War out. Tip for any prospective writers out there, if one of your secondary characters has outlived their initial purpose, either kill them or retire them. 99% of the time, that is going to be the right call for your story. And then just some dumb shit that I didn't like this season. I know it goes against the spirit of the story, but they could have just buried the pearl. Dig a big hole, drop it in, cover it up. Ezran is literally a king. He has a whole ass country to pick from. There is nobody better resourced to make this problem go away. Like, it did make me laugh when Rayllum went back to rescue the pearl from sinking to the depths of a deadly frozen ocean miles from civilization. As if that isn't the best place for it. The pearl was previously hidden underwater, and that worked for centuries. It probably would have worked for even longer if the dragons hadn't left a map to its exact location. Just do that again without the map. It's the perfect plan. But, you know, no pearl, no plot. I get it. What I get less is Aarovos' expo dump about Sol Regem's dead wife. Like, I definitely don't care about it. What I don't get is if I'm supposed to care. The show just telling me that he tragically sat on his wife and squished her or something isn't enough to generate intrigue. Maybe this is something from one of those comics I didn't read, but regardless, this scene was really clunky and unnecessarily ruined the flow of what was otherwise a very good episode. The Candy Pearl switcheroo is just cheap writing. Like, it was just a dumb idea that you could tell they were setting up for something lame to happen, and what do you know? It did. Aarovos being able to possess people when it's immediately plot relevant, Callum insisting he go down and get the pearl himself, straight after being possessed, the magic rune blankie, it's all just very lame. As was the ship monologue. To the Dragon Prince's credit, it has largely recovered from how cringy the humour was in Season 4, but it still has its moments, and this was definitely one of them. Just relentlessly beating us over the head because, haha, it's a ship, and they're a ship, and they're on the ship. It's like shipping, you get it? You know? Their relationship, it's a ship, and that's a ship. It's got Rayllum in the name, and he's talking about the ship, and he's talking about shipping, and it was a good ship, but what's gonna happen to the ship? You get it? Laugh! Laugh! Why aren't you laughing? Also, Aarovos is weird crying. I didn't like it. But there was a lot to be pleased about this season, specifically in its second half, where it's just like a switch being flicked on in episode 6, and all of a sudden the writing feels a lot more refined. Like, okay, yes, there was that dumb shit with the Candy Pearl, but once we're past that, I really liked what they did with this episode. It is the first time I've been genuinely impressed with the Dragon Prince's writing in years. The whole episode is centered around Cosmo, the celestial elf who achieves enlightenment and becomes time blind, meaning he can see different branching timelines, Doctor Strange style or something. As soon as he reveals the pearl is fake, the visual style of the show changes, with everything becoming monochrome apart from Cosmo himself.
Truth is, this pearl does not contain the prison of Aarovos.
It's not immediately obvious why this is the case, but the fact that the effect remains when we come back to this storyline clearly indicates that something isn't right, which is cool, especially as I don't remember the show ever really playing around with its visual style like this outside of Visions and Nightmares. This A-plot is set against an imprisoned Viren, writing a letter to Soren about how, despite starting with good intentions, he has failed him as a father and neglected him, and how Soren shouldn't blame himself for the baggage Viren left him with. And it's a compelling origin story to Viren's corruption with dark magic.
My little boy, gasping to live. We feared we would lose you. And I became desperate.
He knew dark magic was capable of treating Soren's illness. The solution was there. but he was forbidden to use it by Kapar. So his options were either defy his old master or let his son die. And Viren's actions are pretty reasonable, but led to him encoinifying Kapar and sent him down the path of dark magic, and cost him his marriage, which he then took out on Soren. As a backstory, it works. It feels like we genuinely got to understand more of Viren, but what I like particularly about this episode is how it thematically ties in with everything else. So Callum is distraught at finding out he brought the wrong pearl with them, putting it down to Aarovos taking control of his body. This, on top of Cosmo basically telling him his soul is corrupted by darkness, leads to Callum losing any amount of self-belief that he had. Cosmo and Astrid let him know that there is a way to save his soul, but Callum is too far gone to even try. He's completely given up.
I don't have any courage or strength left. Can't do it. I'm sorry.
Astrid blames Cosmo, as despite his enlightenment and objectivity, it was his bluntness towards Callum that crushed his spirit, and she advises her brother that he's shifting the problem of the pearl onto Callum at a moment when he's unable to deal with it. Cosmo now sees this, and the episode reverses to when he told Callum about the pearl, but this time he omits the fact that Callum screwed up and the colour comes back, letting us know that what we had been watching was just a single possible permutation, and that this is the real version of events, one where Callum is spared the harsh truth and is able to face his trial. And this is the thing that ties the whole episode together. The idea is that it's not always the kindest thing to do to burden someone with the whole truth if you're just shifting a problem onto them, but also the idea of having a chance to do things over again in a better way. Both of these tie back around at the end of the episode. Viren ultimately decides not to give Soren his letters, choosing not to give his son the justifications and explanations of his actions, and sparing him the burden of whether or not to accept what he did, knowing that Soren would likely blame himself for their family falling apart.
No. The guard was mistaken.
This is a decision that might have looked like a wasted opportunity for character development in a weaker episode, but now makes sense here because of the clever framing device of Cosmo's abilities. But it's also followed up in Callum's story, with him completing his trial and acknowledging that Rayla is essentially his reason not to give up. After this, Rayllum is officially back on the menu again. But it's not just the fact that they get back together here that's clever, it's specifically how they choose to do it. By replaying their reunion scene from season 4, this time saying the things they truly wanted to say without the hurt or the awkwardness getting in the way. Again, this mirrors Cosmo's abilities in them going back and saying the right thing this time, but also subverting it, by them unburdening each other with the truth and being honest about their feelings. It's one of those things that goes to show, individually these stories aren't miles above other Dragon Prince episode plots, but because here they are nicely tied together thematically by Cosmo's framing device, the episode feels a lot more complete and engaging. Like, finally the writers have taken the time to do something more creatively interesting than simply having the episode's ideas espoused through a patronising speech or basic back and forth dialogue. And I know I said it wasn't just Rayllum being back on the menu that I liked about episode 6, but I am definitely glad that they're officially back on. A few moments skirted a little too close to schmaltz for my liking.
Long way to the moon nexus.
I know.
One more?
One more what?
You know.
I know.
But it's pretty undeniable that as much as Rayla is Callum's one true light, these two are the true lights of the show in general. Like, it's not even necessarily about them being paired romantically, it's just they are really enjoyably written together. They banter and they bounce off each other brilliantly, pretty much regardless of what the scene is. Even in some of the weaker episodes this season where I don't think the overall story quite worked, like the one with the ship or the one with the ice behemoth, Rayla and Callum's actual interactions, seeing them scheme and plot and quarrel and make up, all worked because of their chemistry.
We'll spend the night here, but no punch in the boat.
Is that what they call it these days? And that's been the case for a lot of the Dragon Prince, even during its worst moments. There's a decent chance I might have dropped the show entirely were it not for Rayla and Callum keeping some entertainment alive in the story. It's no coincidence that Season 4, where their relationship is its most antagonistic, is the worst season of the show. So yeah, nothing particularly surprising here, but this is a list of things that are good about the Dragon Prince, so pretty much has to include Rayllum by default. What was surprising was just how hard the scenes of Sol Regem attacking the castle went. While I'm not a fan of how exactly we got here, once Sol Regem nopes out of Kareem's plot and heads towards Katolis, things get a lot more interesting. I think the show's just been so deprived of a villain who poses an actual threat for so long that it was genuinely shocking to have a scene that has any sort of peril. Like, Aarovos has been in the Pearl the whole time, Claudia's just not on the hero's level anymore, and Viren's been completely toothless since Season 3 ended. It doesn't really feel like much has been at actual immediate risk in the show for a very long time. But when Sol Regem's shadow is cast down over the citizens of Katolis, you can actually feel the panic setting in. Shit's about to go down. And they deliver, the castle gets wrecked and my boy Soren takes a brick to the noggin. The action hasn't felt this grand scale since the finale of Season 3 and it's exciting. Not just because the status quo actually feels threatened, but because the castle being burned down means we are finally free of those boring scenes of Ezran's council. And of course, we can't talk about Sol Regem's attack without addressing Viren's sacrifice. This is the fourth time he's died, but the difference is this time it is permanent. I think. But regardless, it is a fitting way to send him off. It wasn't redemption, but it was all he could do in that moment. It didn't repair his relationship with Soren, but it did more than those letters would have. And the fact that it was dark magic, specifically the spell he'd previously used to wage war, this time saving hundreds of lives, was a very poetic way for him to go out. The emotional music ramping up, everything in the scene bathed in orange from Sol Regem's flames, the sketches of his family from when they were once happy, and his last words just repeating,
I am a servant.
Cementing his loyalty to Katolis. If you'd asked Viren how he wanted to go down, this is probably what he would have described. I think in episodes 6 and 8, what we really see is the potential that Viren had as a character. As a man who was troubled and complex, but believed in his noble cause. Personally, I don't think we saw enough of it. I think in the first part of the story he was too flatly villainous, and in seasons 4 and 5, he just didn't do enough of anything. Yes, he broke free of Aarovos, but there was nothing tangible, it was all just coma dreams and visions. Here, in this moment, we're seeing that character development put into action for really the first time. And while we didn't get to see enough of that, I do appreciate what Season 6 has given us here. On a similar note, another character who sorely needed some attention this season was Soren. In my Season 5 video, I lamented the fact that they brought him all the way out to the spot where Claudia and Viren were facing down the heroes and didn't even have them interact. This guy has been languishing in the background of this show. Soren used to have a bit of edge, he used to be kind of a dick towards Callum, and he tried to assassinate Ezran, but over the last few seasons he has been smoothed down into a one-note, one-dimensional goofball. The Flanderization is real. So without a doubt, one of the best things about Season 6 has been Soren actually being given some beefy plot. He's finally forced to confront his dad with all his baggage, as well as take up his military post in the Crown Guard for the first time in forever, and putting himself on the line, even offering up his own life for Viren's spell of protection. And props to Jesse and Akala for really selling Soren's anguish in those pained conversations at Viren's cell.
I'm so proud of you.
What are you trying to do?
Soren, I'm just...
No! Stop it! Just stop it! I know who you are! You're dangerous! Everything you're telling me is some kind of lie! And I'm not going to let you manipulate me again!
Soren had moved on. He'd changed and found a purpose beyond serving his neglectful dad. But all of a sudden, Viren's back, and naturally Soren's angry, but he's also confused. He goes to see his dad, but he doesn't really know what he wants from that. What would reconciliation even look like? Is that even what Soren wants? Is it what Viren deserves? And is it Soren's place to decide that? There's a lot of difficult questions that Soren has been able to ignore for so long, but Viren's re-emergence brings them all back up, and you can really hear that in Soren's voice during their interactions. Viren and Soren are easily the two standout characters from Season 6 to me, and with Viren gone and Soren being the only person who really understands his sacrifice, I am very interested in seeing how that plays into his relationship with Claudia next season. Speaking of Claudia, she was very busy at the end of this season as well, finally unleashing Aarovos onto the world, but not before hearing his backstory. Like Viren's past, I found Aarovos' villain origin story put a lot of pieces into place. Like, as charismatic and entertaining as Aarovos is, it's never really been clear what he's trying to do. The good guys keep mentioning that the entire world is at stake, but specifically, how? What exactly is Aarovos trying to do and why? Like, quite frankly, I don't understand Aarovos' goals or motives, and at this point I'm too afraid to ask, so I massively appreciate us getting some more insight into what's going on with him this season. Aarovos tells Claudia about his young daughter Leola, who was curious and playful and made quick friends with human children, to whom she bestowed the powers of magic. This was apparently in contravention of the cosmic laws, and a young Sol Regem tipped off the Star-Touch Popo, who put Leola on trial and sentenced her to death. Aarovos offered his life in place of hers, and as a mercy, the council compromised that they could die together if that was Aarovos' wish. Obviously, Aarovos rejects this and is forced to watch his daughter's death. She fell to earth, causing a crater which Aarovos filled with his tears, creating the Sea of the Cast Out. Now, you could poke holes in this story, like if it was so easy for a child to do something as significant as give humans magic, why wasn't there anything in place to prevent that? Why couldn't the godlike Star-Touch elves simply unmagic what she had magicked? And how does killing Leola actually resolve the problem in any way? But this is not that kind of backstory. It's supposed to be more mythological. The ending with Aarovos crying the sea into existence is very typical of myths and legends. So that's the spirit of things here, not hard logic. Plus, it's Aarovos telling his own origins, so while what he says is probably true, he might not be giving us the full story. I also love the detail of the star on his chest going dark after Leola's death, visibly showing his turn to darkness, both in his actions and in him promoting dark magic. The backstory gives us more of a peek behind the curtain of what makes Aarovos tick than we have ever seen before, and it does what it needs to in this place in the story, by generating some sympathy for what Aarovos has been through, creating some intrigue as we can't fully trust what he's telling us, and building anticipation for how he's going to get his vengeance on those that wronged him. As if we didn't need any more hype for Aarovos' arrival.
In that moment, I chose to live, and my life took on new purpose.
And now he's here, and he's bloody massive, and I love it. When Aarovos told Janai's sister that he swallowed Queen Aditi, I always thought it was some cryptically worded metaphor, but no, as if he wasn't freak-coded enough. I guess he's into vor too. So quickly, where does this leave us heading into Season 7? Well, in a pretty good place to be honest. In the previous video I'd complained that Season 5 ended with lower stakes than it began with, and that Claudia should have succeeded in releasing Aarovos back then to create some sense of tension. Well, now we're here. Aarovos is an immediate threat, and the hype for Season 7, which is releasing this same year, is huge. Season 7 is set to conclude at the very least this phase of the Dragon Prince's story. Wonderstorm have plans for 3 additional seasons, but assuming they even get greenlit, my suspicions are that they will follow maybe a new set of characters in another part of Xadia's history. So Season 7 may well be the last time we see Rayllum, Callum, Ezran and co, which is very bittersweet. While the show's certainly been more obviously troubled since Season 4, and my gut instinct is that you could probably cut these last 3 seasons down to maybe 12-13 episodes, and have a much more satisfying character-focused story, I do still genuinely like these characters, and I'll be sad to see them go. especially knowing they didn't all hit their potential. But there's still a lot to be excited for in Season 7. We finally shed the Sunfire Elf plotline, and Aarovos' presence should mean there's little room for side quests. We've only got these 9 episodes to wrap everything up, so I want to see a real focus, with everyone's story threads converging and all these character arcs given a proper conclusion. If the show can do that, I think it can still end the saga on a high note. I'm hopeful that Claudia will get some more attention in Season 7 like Soren did this season. Again, they've set her up in a really interesting place to examine her issues, with all the efforts to save Viren fruitless, her and Soren being in Katolis, and her finally unleashing the very big bad. There's a lot of meat still on the bone for her character arc. I'm less hopeful for Ezran. I'm not really sure what they can do for his character arc at this point, but whatever, give him a cool action scene, riding Zim and fighting Aarovos King Kong style, throwing bricks at him or something. And actually, on that note, one of the biggest hurdles the Dragon Prince has set for itself is delivering on the hype around Aarovos. The entire show has been building him up as the ultimate threat, this genius immortal puppet master who's operating on a higher level than everyone else. That's easier to write when he's still in the shadows, but when it gets into the specifics, it's more difficult. Because the show now has to demonstrate Aarovos outsmarting the heroes and posing a legitimate threat, whilst also, presumably, writing a way for the good guys to defeat him that doesn't feel like a cop-out. I don't know how they're going to finish this story. I suspect it's not going to be as simple as beating Aarovos up. That's not the kind of villain he is, or the theme the show is going for. I suspect there will be a few twists along the way. There's certainly going to be more to Aarovos' plan than meets the eye, and there might be some uncomfortable sacrifices on the heroes' parts to save the day. Whether the Dragon Prince can stick that landing, and whether that's an ending the fans will accept, remains to be seen. But until then, I'll be waiting to see how it all plays out. I'll see you all again after the 19th of December for Season 7, and until then, thanks for watching.